Welcome to the What's Liking podcast. Is your host Larry Atencia. With me today is Johanna Palacio. Welcome. How are you?
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. How old are you and where are you from?
I'm 39. I was born in Venezuela, but I identify myself more as Colombian, maybe because when I speak Spanish, that's my accent. But I've been living here for the past 31 years now in New York.
That's interesting because we have a very similar biography. And I was just talking to a colleague who's Venezuelan in my school, and I told her that, I was born in Venezuela, but I'm Colombian. And she's like, how does that work? And I'm just like, all right, my parents are Colombian. Growing up, the culture, the music, the food was, mostly Colombian, obviously.
Yeah.
There's a few things here and there that are Venezuelan, and I know family and friends that are Venezuelan, but
Yeah.
I grew up also like you, just identifying with Colombia and
Yes.
culturally Colombian.
And for the audience who doesn't know our background, we go way back.
Yes. Do
Born in the same hospital, same birthday. That's where it started from. Same birthday, same hospital in Caracas, and then we met in elementary school, and it all clicked
yeah.
between our parents.
How did we figure out, because it's not only that we were born in the same hospital the same day, it was also that it was around the same time, if I'm not mistaken, because our parents had a conversation around the
Oh
times
yeah,
that we were born, and I think it was like an hour apart. So how did that
yes.
even come about?
Because I kept, my mom knew about you because I always spoke to her about Larry and this and that. You were a very popular kid in the fifth grade. I don't know if you remember.
That's good. That's good. I will I will I
So
will I will let everyone know to go to the timestamp where you mentioned that.
yes, and so my our parents met each other, and my mom was like, "Oh my God, now I remember he was the only boy that was born that night among all the other babies that were girls." So, and then
Oh,
that's how our parents started talking, and yes.
yeah.
So it
And
was a
it's
life coincidence.
And it's also interesting because of not just the fact that we were born the same day, same hospital, met in Queens, New York City,
Yeah.
right? Because what are the chances? But it also that our parents would also be immigrants to Venezuela from Colombia,
Yes,
both of them.
exactly.
So it's
Yes.
just a confluence of many different biographical details that are
Yeah.
very hard to have achieved.
Yes, exactly.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a dentist. I'm a
Uh,
dentist. I own my own practice here. I live in Westchester. I graduated like 11 years ago, and I decided to open a practice with my best friend. Not right after graduation. This was like 5 years ago that we decided to go into business together, and now we work together in our own office.
that's very impressive. I know when we got back in touch, you were a student at UPenn. You want to tell us a little bit about your experience here in at UPenn and live in Philadelphia?
So, growing up in New York City, when it was time to apply to college, to graduate programs for dental school, I applied to like many programs. And one of them, of the ones that I was like in between to go, obviously NYU accepted me, but they have a huge like class size, and I didn't want to go there because you can easily get lost in like the size of the class. The other option was to go to UConn, but I didn't want to go there because it's like in the middle of nowhere. It's a very small place. So I felt like UPenn provided that middle range where the class size wasn't so big, but it was also living in Philly, where it's a city like here, New York.
Mhm.
So I really, really liked it. I would say the only thing that was kind of a shock to me was that when you go into those graduate programs, whether it's medical school, dental school, or I don't know, maybe even law school, when it's like elite universities, you don't see a lot of diversity, or you don't see a lot of people like me for my background. So I would say that was the only shocking thing. But I adapted to it because thankfully there was another guy that was Mexican coming from California. And then the class size was like 120. And out of all those 120 kids, it was only him and I who actually spoke Spanish. Like there were five that were considered Hispanic, but the other three were just by last name, just because they had the last name. They didn't have like the cultural background that I did. So it was just myself and this Mexican kid, and we bonded. And but I would say overall it was great. I love Philly. I would have stayed living in Philly if I could, but my parents were here, and so I just came back to New York for that.
Are you married with children?
I am married and I have two kids, two boys.
How old are they?
They're 5 and 2 years old. They're both born in August. So August is a big month for me because I got married in August and both of my kids were born in August. So I would like to say that everything I plan usually comes out. Like if I wanted this way, I mean, you can't plan kids, but I planned them and they came out the same month.
So, so you plan to get married in August and to have children in August? Wow, that's
Yeah.
impressive. And why August?
No, I would say anytime in the summer.
Oh,
Our
okay,
birthdays are July, and so I love the summer, and it just came to be that August was the month that
okay,
everything
gotcha.
happened. So, yes,
Okay,
because for those of us that are like elsewhere listening to us, why the summer? And it's because the winters here are brutal. So for me, I hate the winter. So
yeah.
I just think that a birthday could be celebrated out in a park. There's so many more options, whereas in the winter, January, February, you're so limited as to what you can do. So
I agree with you completely. I love the summer, and this winter in the East Coast has been a really cold one. So you are not wrong that it's been
yeah.
brutal and that I don't like it at all. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
What were your parents like growing up?
So that was a question I was thinking about as we were preparing for this podcast, because when I was growing up, it was hard. It was hard. Maybe you can sympathize with this because immigrant parents that didn't speak English, I grew up in poverty, basically. And it was very hard growing up like that because since they didn't speak English, they didn't know that they could apply to these government programs that could give you like food stamps or this and that. And so it was like a dad was the only one working, and it was just not, it didn't make sense for my mom to go get a low paying job to then have to pay a nanny to take care of my sister and myself. So growing up with my parents was tough because financially there weren't a lot of opportunities, and when you don't have a lot of those finances in place, it leads to a lot of like problems within a marriage, and that spills into the children, me and my sister. So I would say it was a hard upbringing that I think a lot of immigrant people can sympathize, because a lot of people go through that.
And lots of pressure too because of, I mean, we grew up, we're the same age and we grew up in Queens, and even though it wasn't as expensive as it is now, it was still very expensive for immigrant parents, living off of low wage employment. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why we got up and left and moved to Philadelphia, is because the rent in Queens had gotten so high that we weren't going to be able to handle it, while also my parents having to take care of three children
Yeah.
and
Imagine.
do different things. So I agree with you completely.
I
But
think my
other,
parents were very brave to move. They were very brave to move, and that's something that maybe my parents should have done, but they didn't. So it just
I
led
mean,
to
there's
different.
yeah, I mean, they're still there, so it was obviously also the right decision for them.
Mhm.
But I do feel that in New York City, especially, the pressures for people with low-paying jobs is
Yeah.
very strong financially. Now, but aside from the finances, would you say that you got along with them and that the relationship was strong, or was there issues as well?
There were definitely issues with my dad because he comes up from a patriarchal thinking, and I think it's because of also, again, the finances. To me, that always played a big issue between my parents. So no, I didn't have a close relationship with my dad, maybe because I didn't see his point of view back then. He was raising two girls going to like New York City public school. My sister was like not the best behaved. So that spilled into a lot of things with myself as well. But I was very close to my mom. So I would say in retrospect, like they both did the best they could, but it was no, I didn't get along with my dad when I was growing up. But now I do.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
What was school like for you?
So school was very good for me. And I think it's because I was always a goody two shoes. Like from early on, I understood that the way to get out of the cycle that I was living at home was to just do whatever I had to do in school because that was going to get me money in the future. Like if I don't get a career, then I'm not going to make money. And if I don't make money, I'm going to be living in the same things when I was a kid. Like I can't say I had extracurricular activities because my parents didn't know that I could be enrolled in X, Y, and Z and do this. Like, so to me, I was always a goody two shoes because I felt like that was the way to get up ahead. So no, it was good. But I went to New York City public schools. I went to like a school, I think you might know Newtown High School. It's like in Elmhurst. It's huge, overcrowded. You could so easily get lost, but there were very redeemable teachers that would help you out, this and so I was always like in the honors program, this and that, but I also had my Colombian friends to go hang out and do stuff with.
I,
I had
I'm
like,
I'm only laughing because it's bringing back lots of memories for my experience as well. I was zoned to go to Newtown,
oh
and I was like, nah, I ain't going, not going, because Newtown had a reputation in our
yeah,
neighborhood of being the bad school.
there were fights all the time.
So it's like I knew myself too. So I applied to Flushing. 'Cause Flushing was bad, but not like Newtown.
Yeah,
And I was in the law program. So it was kind of like the honors
yeah,
program. And so, I went in thinking that, okay, I'm going to, do my best. And then
yeah.
my
Imagine if you
friends
had
too.
gone to
So
high school, I mean to Newtown High School.
that exactly.
I had two sets of friends. I had like the Asian Indian friends who always did what they had to do because it's the truth. Indian and Asian parents are always like the people at the library and this and that,
Hmm.
taking their kids to the library. And then I had my Colombian friends who were doing everything else.
I wasn't smart like you and gravitate towards the Asian and Indian, East Asian and
Yeah,
South Indian population at Flushing, which
yeah,
I could have. I definitely was, hanging out with my Colombian friends and my Latino
yeah.
contingent. Yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, I was thinking that, Flushing was going to be a little bit better, and then it basically turned out to be the same as
Just in a
Newtown for
smaller
me.
scale. In a
Exactly,
smaller
yeah.
scale.
Although I do think Flushing and Newton are kind of the same size. Um,
Okay, okay.
but continue. So you had a good experience, elementary and
Nice.
middle
And my
school.
middle school, yeah. And then when it was time to go to college, for some reason, I was kind of lost again. I was like, okay, what's going to happen? Because in my head, I always wanted to be a dentist. And the reason why is because I had braces when I was a kid for many, 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 many years. And I would tweak my braces, and I had a very sleazy dentist. Like he was just not good. You could tell he would probably like overextend himself with women. This goes back to my parents not knowing that they could apply to Medicaid and go to a Medicaid office and get proper care. So they just paid some random dentist to do my braces, and he was not the best. So as I was seeing this man in doing his job and all that with my sister and myself and whatever, I was thinking like, man, this dude is what, he's like a creep, and he gets paid to do this. Like I could be a dentist, like I could do my own teeth. So in my head, because I didn't see other careers around me, I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be a dentist so that other people get a better experience when they go to the dentist. It doesn't have to be like this man. So after high school, I was a little confused as to how is the process of going to graduate school, because I had no idea. Nobody had ever done it before me. And I ended up going to City College, which is like one of the city universities in New York City. It's not like a big state school, but it's a city school. And City College was great. But but it was an hour away from Queens. You have to go to Queens all the way to uptown Manhattan, which is like an hour. And yeah, I love my experience there, but there were very fewer Colombians. That's when I started like learning, oh, there's Dominicans, because in the Upper West Side is like a lot of Dominicans. So one of my best friends, she's Dominican, and I started like again with some Colombians, but there were like a lot more Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. And I love City College. It was great. And then after
But
that, I went to Penn.
but growing up, we had a. I mean, I had a lot of Dominican friends, and
I
Queens
don't
was
know
full of
why I
Dominicans
didn't.
because we went to the same elementary school, and then did we go to middle school? I think we did, right? Middle
We
school.
went to I went to IS 73, which is
Yeah,
somewhere in. You
I
went there
went.
too?
Sixth and seventh grade, and then I got kicked out. Nothing egregious. It's not about me, but I got kicked out, and then I went to one IS 125 for eighth grade.
Oh, okay.
One of my most hurtful experiences because I loved IS 73. So I think I
Probably
had
was
a
for the best. You would have
I
gotten
don't
lost. I don't know.
I don't know because I think I had a really bad time and experience at 125. Not because of the kids, like I was still,
Uh-huh.
I had friends, but I didn't have my cohort and that group of friends that I had been with
Yes.
from fifth into sixth grade. Because I had also gone to a different elementary school. I don't know if you remember. For 229,
Yeah.
fifth grade
Yeah,
was
you
my
were
first
new.
year.
Yeah, you were new.
So maybe that's why I had Dominican friends because I was at 143, which was in Corona, and so
Oh,
third and fourth, it was there.
I guess the good thing about that for you is you learn to adapt. If you look at it that way, you just had to adapt to a new environment, and you did it.
So we didn't talk or hang out in sixth and seventh grade.
No, probably not. And it's also because maybe I was not as popular. I was just, I was doing always my own thing and just there watching a lot of novelas. So in my head, I don't know. I was also in ESL for a while. I think when I stopped being in ESL classes was in eighth grade. That's a long time
Oh,
because
that is a long time. Okay.
I came here, started third grade to eighth grade. It's a long time, but I don't think it ever clicked in my head. Like test taking, because the way you get out is through test taking.
Right.
And I don't think it clicked in me until I had this great teacher in seventh grade who, she took a liking in me because she understood
Hmm.
that it's not that I didn't know, is that maybe I didn't know how to take the test,
Hmm. Hmm.
or I would just, get lost in the crowd because I was
Yeah.
quiet. I was always like laid back and just kind of existing. You know what I mean?
I don't remember that because we were friends in fifth grade. I thought you were part of the our little
You thought
group.
I was part of the clique?
Yeah, of the little Colombian clique.
I had good friends in IS 73 and PS 229 because we were living in that type of town that it was not Hispanic, it was not Corona, it was not
Hmm.
Elmhurst. There were a
Yeah.
lot of white kids too, and Asian kids. It was just that in Newtown, it's everything, and
Hmm.
that is why I think we're so blessed because we were able to experience that a whole melting pot. I could tell you, like you say, I remember a very good Polish friend, a great friend that was Muslim that I used to be in the track team with,
Hmm.
a friend, Indian friends. And back then I was like, India, and you come here and you already know everything. Why is it that you already speak English? Like, do you see the
Yeah. Yeah.
process that was going on in my head? It's like being very confused about being the immigrant from South America versus this girl that just came from India, and she's so smart and she speaks English so well. And that's when, like, also history, I became very
Hmm.
interested in that because I didn't know why they already spoke English so well. And then they
Yeah.
could speak their own native tongue language so well.
Definitely an interesting experience growing up in Queens. It was so diverse, like literally
Yeah.
diverse, and you just made friends and experienced different types of people for sure. What are your political views?
So I center lean left. So I would say I'm center, but I lean left. And this might sound a little like, why are you center? Well, when Bernie Sanders was running for presidency, I even canvassed for that man. I had never done that. I had never been so politically active. but the way he speaks and like what he stands for resonated in me. And so I really believed in him, and I was a registered Democrat. And then that whole fiasco where the establishment gave it to Hillary Clinton, I got so pissed off that I just removed myself from being registered as a Democrat. So now I'm not registered in any political party. I can't vote in primaries right now, and I think I'm going to leave it like that for a while. But the reason I say I'm center is because sometimes like the left can be too much as well, like too woke for me. There are some things like gender pronouns, that kind of stuff I don't really follow, but I would say that I lean left if I had to pick.
Interesting you mentioned 2016 when the establishment seemed to pick Hillary in opposition to Bernie Sanders because the same thing happened in 2020
Oh,
where where they chose
yeah.
Biden over him, and so it was like
Yeah.
two presidential electoral cycles where the more popular Bernie Sanders was not allowed to represent
Yeah.
the Democratic Party,
And I
and
think
so
they found out real hard the consequences of that.
yeah,
I think so.
that is
Because
that.
I think a lot of people that were voting for Trump would have voted for Bernie Sanders instead. Like I really believe that.
So it's like the left populist or alternative to the Trump right populist movement.
Yes.
Are you religious?
I grew up Catholic, but I don't practice anymore. Why don't I practice anymore? Because I just don't really feel like I have to. I think I'm more spiritual. Now, I do have to say that when it's time for Christmas for my kids, they they believe that it's baby Jesus that comes to bring the gifts. And my
Okay.
husband is Puerto Rican, so they believe in the three kings. So it's baby Jesus and the three kings that comes to deliver the gifts. So I would say I'm more like culturally Catholic or religious, but not because I am practicing. I don't plan to get them baptized, none of that. Probably because it also takes too long in this country. It's like 2 years to get your kid through First Communion, and I don't have time for that. I don't want to wake up on a Sunday to go to church. Like, no.
You could send them to Catholic school, and then you don't have to worry about catechism Sunday class.
Oh, no, I already pay enough in taxes to go to public school.
Yeah, in Westchester, which
In
is
Westchester, yes, you
one
pay
of
a
the
good penny.
best, yeah, one of the best public school districts in the country. Correct?
Yes.
You mentioned your husband being Puerto Rican and you
Mhm.
being culturally Catholic. Is he religious?
He's not religious at all. I would say he makes more fun of it than I do. Like he's not, but he respects it. He respects the three kings because it's also like a tradition in Puerto Rico. It's like the January 6th. There's people
Mhm.
that go around the town dressed up as the three kings and like give gifts to the children. So it's more of like a cultural thing versus actually believing and going to church. So, and I grew up with that too. I grew up with baby Jesus bringing the gifts. So I
Mhm.
kind of like the idea, but I don't necessarily think that I have to go to church to carry it in my soul. Now, when my mom dies, I do. You're gonna keep saying what? I do believe, like in Colombians, for people that don't know, when somebody dies or something really important, you do a novena, which is like you pray a rosary, right? So I feel like, okay, if my mom or my parents die, they would want a rosary to be said in their name. So it's like those little things where it's like more of a cultural
Yeah.
or tradition versus going to church every day. That's
Yeah.
how religious I am.
Some people make the argument that religion is more about the practices and rituals and how they
Mhm.
structure the big life events, birth, puberty, marriage, death,
Yeah.
etc. And so, you're not wrong to think of religion as structuring how to approach
Yeah.
life and those big moments. So, yeah, I don't necessarily think that it's a hypocritical or a contradictory stance, but I'm sure the true believers might, have something to
Yeah.
say about that. But I
Yeah.
do think that religion as a structuring suites of practices and rituals
Mhm.
so that we can make sense
Yeah.
of life is
Uh,
important.
I like that description. Yeah.
What's something that you regret?
I definitely regret not learning how to invest in stocks when I was younger, because I remember having a great teacher again back in like 7th grade, and he would use like the newspaper. I think he was like a social studies teacher. He was
Yeah.
so good, and he used the newspaper, and he used to teach us about stock. And I remember having to do one time like a project where I had to investigate one of those petroleum companies, gasoline, whatever. But I remember doing the project, and that was about it. But he would teach us how to look at the newspaper and stocks. So going back to what I regret knowing about Chipotle back in the early 2000s, going to buy food. And do you know how much an individual stock is for Chipotle? It's insane. It's like a lot of money. Nvidia, which is the company that produces the computer chips and all that stuff, it exploded big. So I wish I had invested a lot more in
Yeah.
that. I wish I had invested in Apple. I wish I had invested in stock. I wish somebody had told me when you were young, listen, you got some money, save aside, put like 500 into these stocks, and then just don't touch it, see it grow. And I learned about that a lot later in life. I learned about that later when I finally had some money. But you don't need money to invest in stock. If you have like $200 to $300, I would tell everybody that it's young, that's young, a younger crowd, to learn about stocks, to put some money aside, and to, because that's how people get rich. That's how these white people have so much money, because they learn that young, or they have parents that know about it, and then they open accounts for their kids, and then that compounds and just grows and grows and grows and grows. So it's not about investing a crazy amount of money, because you could also lose it, but it's just like learning about the stock market, which a lot of us don't know about.
I'm in the same boat. It's funny that you had this political shift because
Mhm.
I did too. I was very much in my younger adult life anti-capitalist and went against any idea that dealt with finance, investments, stocks, etc.
Mhm.
because it just meant compromising my beliefs
Oh.
against the capitalist
Oh, so you were
system.
really left. You were really on the other
Yes,
side.
exactly. Yes, I was on the far left political spectrum, and you have children, you get older, you become more of a centrist and become more conservative, basically.
Mhm.
And that was one of my New Year's resolutions this year was to open up an account and start investing in stocks, which I wish I would have when I was younger had that realization because as you
Yeah,
said, the younger you are and the sooner you get into the stock market, the more time it has to grow and
yeah,
for that 7 to 10% rate to compound on your
yeah,
initial investment. So like you said, we had to discover those things by ourselves. We didn't have a background with our family
yeah,
or friends or neighborhood to teach us those lessons. And
yeah,
also, I think as Latinos and minorities, we tend
yeah,
to, based on the educational system and the ideological conversations that
yeah,
we tend to be pretty anti American, anti the bourgeois culture that exists here. And
yeah.
so I think sometimes we think that it's beyond us, or also we tend to be in opposition to it. So
Well, I
that might
think
be part of it.
also, yes, but also like you were a very active thinker. You actually didn't do it because you didn't believe in it. You didn't think it would be fair. But I think a lot of people don't do it because they just have no idea, like zero, like no idea what stock, what's a stock, like how people don't think about that because they live in their day by day. Like, how am I going to get to pay this and that? Or why would I put 300 to that? Like, why would I spend 300 where I can just do it, buy food or pay for my car, or like buy like a very expensive car? You don't need an expense. Like, I lived in the Bronx for a while. After I moved from Philly, I lived in the Bronx. And I can tell you that I saw a lot of beautiful cars in the Bronx. And I always thought, like, why are people spending money in cars in the Bronx? that you're going to park outside or like in a lot. You could just spend that money to do X, Y, and Z, you know? So it's priorities. It's just not
Mm.
knowing, maybe. It's not that they don't want to, is that they don't know about it.
I agree
And
with
it's
that.
not taught in school.
And I think also it's intimidating, right?
Hmm.
Because trying to become well versed and knowledgeable about investments, the stock market, companies, having
Yeah.
to do that research and having to learn the vocabulary around
Yeah.
that, sometimes is something that we tend to be fearful of. You know,
Yeah.
like picking up the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times,
Hmm.
or having to be conversant in the investment lexicon is a little difficult,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so if I don't have the confidence in myself, or I don't prioritize, putting in the effort and the time
Yes.
to master these ideas, then I'm just going to say, you know what, forget it, ignore it, moving on.
Hmm.
What's the best decision you've ever made?
To stay in school.
Yes.
to,
Yes.
to stay in school, to get a higher education. I love my career. I love what I do. I don't necessarily like the insurance system that we have based on reimbursement and whatever, but I love it. I love my career, and I think that was the best decision, to just stay in school, because staying in school means a good career, and a good career means money. Money,
Yeah.
money, money.
Were you ever considering not finishing?
Well, when I was transitioning from high school to college, my parents didn't understand, because again, I wanted to be a dentist, and they didn't understand college. They didn't understand that I had to do 4 years to then do another, because in Colombia or
Mm.
in European countries, for those of listening that maybe they don't know, usually in high school, in South America, you go right to where your career is. Oh, you want to be a lawyer? Go be a lawyer. You want to be a doctor? You be a doctor. There is no college in South America or in Europe. It's only here in the US. So my parents didn't understand why I had to waste 4 years.
Sorry to interrupt you. I do think that you do have to go to an institution of higher learning or college, but just not as long as you do in the US.
Yeah, they definitely have to enroll. But once you enroll it, you take like a certain, take like an
Lawyer.
entry level
Yeah.
test, and that dictates whether you are eligible to be a doctor or
Okay.
dentist. So it's like after high school, they have like 7 years of, or 6 years of their career to be a doctor. So anyway, when I was in college, to me it seemed so long, 9 years of more schooling, that I was almost going to go to pharmacy school because it's a lot shorter. But I do have to say that one thing about my dad, he always believed in me, and he said, no, you have to do it, whatever it takes. So I never, in college, I didn't have to work because my parents provided for me, and I had a scholarship, so I was paying for my own things through that scholarship. So no, I never doubted myself. It was only like a little time when I said, oh my god, this is too long, 9 years, I don't think I could do that. But then it went away very quickly, and I just stuck to my guns. And then when I got to college, there were a lot of other friends, my Dominican friends, that were pre-med or engineering or this and that. So I understood quickly that it just, everything takes that long. So just stay for the ride.
I know three questions. What's your favorite book of all time?
I don't have a favorite book, but I have favorite authors. One of them is Javier Moro, which is, he writes mostly in Spanish, and the reason I have him is because he writes like historical biographies, and I like to read about historical biographies because I feel like it's entertaining, but I'm learning at the same time. Like I just don't feel like I like to read like these Patterson books that are like,
Beach reads,
yeah,
airport lounge reads.
yeah, I don't think I'm getting anything from that. From that, I would just watch a movie. So I just, if I'm gonna read, which takes time, I rather read something that's historically based and entertaining. So I have him for the Spanish language, because when I try to read mostly in Spanish so that I can learn. Because
That's impressive.
grammar is different. My life is in English every day. Like I speak all the time in English. So if I'm gonna read, I want to practice the fact that I can read in Spanish. And then for the American, I would say Zhang Chang is like a Chinese She's British, actually. She's Chinese British. And she also writes historical biographies about China. And it was very interesting to me. So I liked her. I read like three of her books and they were great.
Who does
Yeah.
Javier Moro write about? Like what type of
He wrote
historical
about
figures?
he no, he writes about stories
Oh,
like
okay.
or people too. So one of the stories that he wrote, it's called El Imperio Eres Tú, like you're the empire, and he was talking about how the Portuguese Empire moved to Brazil and they established the kingdom in Brazil, and that's why like Brazilian people have a different sense of pride than I guess most of Latin America because they actually had the king living in Brazil for a
Mm,
very long time. So it's about that. It's a novel based on the fact that the whole, the kingdom migrated
mm,
to Brazil and they established themselves there. And then the other person that he wrote about was this Spaniard architect that came here and he built like the dome in the Grand Central Station in Manhattan. Like
mm.
he was the architect that built that
Oh, wow.
dome. So it's like his story. Like he was super poor, but he came here and he made himself into like a very renowned architect back in the day. Yeah, that's why I
Yeah.
liked him.
What's your favorite movie?
I don't know that I have one.
You don't have a favorite movie? That's
I don't think I have
first
one.
first guest to not have a favorite movie.
I guess the
What's
Terminator, I watched that like a million times. I love the
in
Terminator.
dubbed in Spanish? Because they used
No,
to have
no,
that
no.
all the time in Telemundo.
Yes.
So Terminator is a classic
It's a
action
good
flick. Yeah, I
movie.
like it. Hmm.
Terminator 2. Yes, I love that movie. I watched it so many times. I think that question is hard to answer because there's so many categories. Are you asking about Disney? Are you asking about action? Are you
Yeah.
asking about drama and love? So I can't pick one.
Favorite musical album?
Okay, I would say Somewhere in Time by Iron Maiden. That's like 1986. Do you know Iron Maiden, the band?
No. Hard rock.
Yes, I am into hard rock, like harder than Metallica, like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, they're classics from the 80s. This is all
Wow.
like 80s rock. I love 80s rock.
This is
Like,
why
and I
you.
also like hard death metal that
Yeah,
they
this
sing
is
like
why you
that.
were not part of the clique when we were growing up. Now it makes perfect sense because you're over here listening to Iron Maiden and diabolical devil
Well,
worshiping
actually,
music.
they're
That was
not.
a joke to the
Yeah, no, no,
devil
but
worshippers out
but
there.
for the audience out there listening, I mean, Iron Maiden has some very good classical songs, and one of them is about Alexander the Great, which is in this album. And again, it's like a historical figure, Alexander the Great, and they sing, and it's melodic. It's just so beautiful. Of course, I like salsa. I grew up with that and all that, but that album is just beautifully done. It's hard rock, but it's like instrumental. Like I also really like classical music. So I think I'm just driven to like a lot of instruments.
Wow, I didn't see that coming, but I will definitely give it a listen.
Or
Uh,
Judas Priest, they're
or
very
I've heard
good.
of them too. Yeah. Are there any new acts, any new artists that do hard metal?
Sabaton is a band from Sweden and they sing historical. It's also rock, but all of their songs are based on historical things that happened. Like one of their songs is called Primo Victoria and it's about D-Day. It's about when the Americans went and, they saved the world. And every time they play that song live, they always say, "Oh, we're singing this when they come here." They always say, "Oh, we're singing this music in English because of you guys. Like otherwise we would be singing everything in German because they saved, the world from the Nazis taking over." So anyway, that's an example of Sabaton. And Sabaton just sings about everything is historical. So for people, like if you take a listen, you would be like, "Oh, this doesn't sound great," but you have to listen to the words and everything is about history. And that's why I love those albums because you learn as you listen to. But it's not about learning. It's just the
It's
the instruments, right?
it's fun. Does your
Because I
husband like?
would, can I just one more thing?
Of
Because
course.
nowadays, like, of course, I'm gonna say something very controversial. Like Bad Bunny, he came up with a very good album. His album is great. It touches up on a lot of Puerto Rican, like salsa and things like that. But a lot of times now, people just sing and everything is dubbed, and it's just like one person and a little whatever fixing up music. There's no instruments anymore because it's mainly one person and then another person that fixes it up. You know what I
So
mean?
it's a production team. Bad Bunny is replaceable. You just have a team, a production team that could just use another person to make the same songs, whereas truly talented people are not replaceable.
Well, yeah, I guess he's talented, but I think also is the fact that he can go play in a stadium and there's no like, you don't need a guitarist because he doesn't have a guitar solo. You just need this one guy. And, so I think that's why the music nowadays, I don't really like love it because to me, it's not much to it.
Now, I know you had a writer that you loved who wrote in Spanish,
Hmm.
and then a
Yeah.
writer who wrote in English.
Hmm.
You mentioned loving Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and Sabaton,
Yeah.
which sing in English.
Yeah.
So, which artist or album is your favorite in Spanish?
I love all like Willie Colon. I just love all his music. I guess I like Shakira, but the back in the day Shakira.
Oh yeah, me too. Mhm.
Yeah. So my Spotify is very eclectic because I have music from everywhere. Everywhere. It could be like an Indian Bollywood song, and then it could be a rock song, and then it could be salsa. So I would say like if I had to pick in Spanish, I like Rubén Blades and I like Willie Colon and I like Shakira. Yeah.
Okay,
It's
well,
just more artists than albums.
okay. It's been great chatting with you, catching up, and I look forward to continuing to,
Yes,
keep in touch and keep our friendship going
of
and
course.
sending each other our birthday shout
Regards.
outs. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Our birthday regards every year. We never forget. It's impossible, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for being part of the What's Lacking podcast.
Yes. Thank you.